Good afternoon. This is May Perez, your host, and welcome to the fourth installment of the class lecture series. Today's event is held in cooperation with the University of Santo Tomas Unitas Journal, which is headed by Editor-in-Chief Maria Luisa Torres Reyes, who is also the Editor Emerita of the Ateneo de Manila's Critica Cultura. The class lecture series is primarily geared towards developing up-to-date, flexible, and relevant ways of teaching a range of subjects offered in the Commission on Higher Education or CHED-approved new AB curriculum. In the context of the teaching and learning limitations imposed by the quite prolonged COVID pandemic, topics of the online lectures range from new curricular content to the pedagogy in the classroom delivery of the syllabus. Colleagues who are esteemed experts in their particular fields have agreed to be part of the series covering topics in mandated subjects such as cultural studies, creative writing, critical theory, literature content courses, and the use of technology in the classroom, classnet setting, among others. Guest speakers have been requested to share their ideas and experience in teaching particular subjects in relation to the syllabus, pedagogy, teaching tools, materials, and classroom techniques that they use, focusing on any of best practices. A question and answer portion will follow the lecture with the audience. To recap, this lecture series of class started last June 24 with Dr. Mark Kayanan's topic, Teaching Creative Writing Poetry, seconded last July 1 with the topic, Teaching Southeast Asian Cultural Studies by Dr. Carlos Piocos, and just last July 8, Francis Juliano delivered a lecture on teaching law and literature. Today's installment of the class lecture series is about teaching literature in a language classroom. The abstract reads, of lines, leaves, and life. Literature uses language in a special way, according to many scholars. Thus, this special use of language makes literature more difficult to comprehend than other forms of discourse. This presentation attempts to facilitate decoding of meaning of literary texts through a better understanding of how language works. How this relationship between language and literature works will be shown through a discussion of a selected literary text. This afternoon's speaker is Professor Maria Milagros, C. Laurel, PhD. Professor Laurel teaches at the University of the Philippines and is the current chair of the Technical Committee for English of the Commission on Higher Education. She earned her Bachelor of Arts degree, cum laude, her Master of Arts, and her Doctor of Philosophy degrees from the same university, which is UP Diliman. She was an English Language Fellow at the Foreign Educators Program, Georgetown University, Washington, D.C. in 2013. She received the UP Professorial Chair Award in 2016, the Balsamo Asian Scholar Award in 2011 in Japan, the 2005-2006 TESOL International Thomson Heinle Award for Excellence in Teaching, the UP President's International Publication Award in 2003, the UP Chancellor's Award as Outstanding Teacher also in 2003, the UP Centennial Faculty Grant in 2010, and in 2011, the Betty Go Belmonte Professorial Chair in 1999, and the UP Diliman Chancellor's Award as Outstanding Faculty in Extension Work in the same year. She has published her research studies in local and international journals and has delivered lectures in various countries, including Australia, Brunei Darussalam, Cambodia, Hong Kong, India, Indonesia, Japan, Korea, Macau, Malaysia, Russia, Taiwan, and Thailand. Ladies and gentlemen, let us all welcome our esteemed speaker, Professor Maria Milagros Carrion Laurel.
Good afternoon, colleagues and friends. Thank you very much for that very kind introduction. I thought you were reading the bio notes of another person. Anyway, yes. Okay, can I have a screen share? Okay. Can you see my screen now? This is the original title of my presentation this afternoon, Of Lines, Leaves, and Life. However, this title probably sounds too cryptic, and so a subtitle was provided. This is actually what I was asked to talk about this afternoon. Now, let me ask a question as I begin my presentation. How many of you are English teachers? Maybe right now I cannot see the hands raised on screen. I guess many of you are teaching English. In our Philippine context, when you are hired as an English teacher, you are expected to be good at teaching not only language, the English language, but also literature in English, right? So you are not just a teacher of language, you're also a teacher of literature. And so our language classroom sometimes turns out to be a literature classroom too. So for this afternoon, I'm going to talk about both language and literature. How do they come together? Let us talk about language very briefly. Don't worry, this is not a 3-unit course on language. So, what is the nature of language? What do we know about language? What is it that we need to know about the nature of language? A common definition given by many of our language majors in the University of the Philippines gives a definition which they very frequently mouth, probably not even understanding what it means. I quote, "Language is a system of arbitrary vocal symbols used for human communication," unquote. One time I asked them, okay, you're giving me practically the same definition of language. Who said that? They could not give me the name of the author. Anyway, well, they did their research later on. This is a very common view of language, that language is arbitrary in nature. Take, for example, the word love. Love has been defined in various ways. The Bible, for example, describes love using different adjectives. You remember the famous quotation from what book is that? Corinthians. Love is patient, love is kind, love does not envy, love does not boast, etc., etc. There are many ways of defining it, in other words, even in that single chapter from the Bible. In another part, there is a narration of an entire story the story of the Good Samaritan, if you're familiar with it. And that story also talks about love. So long or short, the Bible has come up with different definitions of language just to show you that language really is arbitrary. You can use it in so many ways to say the same idea. One poet, on the other hand, even says, "My love is like a red, red rose that's newly sprung in June." Familiar words? Robert Burns. But despite this arbitrary nature of language, and precisely because of this nature, language has a system. Otherwise, without a system, can you imagine we can just call the table by any other name? And how do we get to understand each other? And so we need a system for it. Language works because precisely it has a system. The system allows for effective communication. It is through this system that we are able to communicate efficiently, effectively. Hence, we do not say play when we intend to convey pray. Those are two different words, two different meanings, two different sounds, in fact. This is how language works. Many of our jokes, in fact, actually come from our play with the sounds of language. My students, my foreign students in class would say, "We play in church." Are you sure you play in church? So for them, play, pray, "Ma'am, what difference does it make?" But it does make a difference. So punning results in jokes. It may bring about laughter sometimes because the language system would not accept one sound to replace another. We communicate using sounds, words, sentences. We consciously put letters in proper order to form words. Likewise, we place words in specific places in an utterance to create meaningful discourse. It is in this context that I will now show you how language functions in the discourse of literature. Again, literature, it has a very popular notion. Many believe that literature is language used in a special way. It is not an ordinary use of language, in other words. There is a special way of using language in literature. Let us compare these next slides. "She is beautiful," says one. Another says, "She walks in beauty like the night of cloudless climes and starry skies." They're practically saying the same thing. She's beautiful. But what makes the two utterances different from each other? One may be classified as a literary text. The other is ordinary discourse, everyday language. And so, for this afternoon's presentation, I have chosen a text from E. E. Cummings from the book Complete Poems, 1904 to 1962, E. E. Cummings. This is a 2-inch thick book. He was supposed to have published around 2,900, maybe even more poems during his lifetime. This volume contains his complete poems from 1904 to 1962. And I have selected this particular poem for our discussion. How many of you are familiar with this poem? No hands raised. Do I see a hand raised in the audience?
Can you repeat the question, ma'am, again?
Are you familiar with this poem?
Yes, ma'am.
You have seen this poem before? When you first saw it, did you even recognize it as poetry? Did you even think it's a poem? You know, when I first showed this to my students, they said, "Ma'am, what's this?" We don't understand what it is. Ma'am, ano ba yan, draft? Parang mali yata yung na-project yung slide. It could be one of those things that your children were probably put in your computer, no? But no, it's one of the poems of E. Cummings. And let's read it. On the surface, you can see lines. You can see letters. You can see numbers on the left side, but I provided those numbers. That's not part of the original poem. This is a technique that I learned from my mentor, my beloved mentor, Professor Nieves Epistola. If you want to discuss a poem in class effectively, even prose, no? You have to codify your text so that it would be very easy for you to refer to the lines. And so, let me explain how it goes. There are 5 stanzas in all. The first stanza has 1 line. And so we call that 1.1. First stanza, first line. Second stanza has 3 lines. 2.1, 2.2, 2.3, as I labeled them. Stanza 3 has only 1 line, 3.1. Stanza 4 has 3 lines, 4.1, 4.2, 4.3, and you can see the corresponding lines there. And the last stanza, the 5th, has only 1 line. So that's 5.1. This is the poem we're going to analyze this afternoon, and I need your help. So we will zoom in on every line, for which reason I have labeled them by numbers. So when I refer to the lines, I will just say line 4.1, and you know it's S parenthesis, or line 4.3, and there's a letter L in 4.3. That's how it's going to go. Okay? So, colleagues and friends, I now formally begin our workshop. I will be asking you to do a little role play as we examine this poem by E. Cummings. To tell you the truth, this is the first time I am doing this role play online. I tried this out in my classroom before. It was a lot of fun in a face-to-face classroom. This is the first time I'm doing it virtual online. So I will need a lot of your imagination to make our role play work. Okay? So I need your cooperation, I need your participation, and a lot of imagination. Okay. As I go through every line, this is how it's going to go. That's line 1.1. And take note, I put on the right side of the screen, you have the original poem. As I isolate the lines, the line that I am discussing will be on the left side. So focus on the first line, first stanza, 1.1. As part of our role play, I would like you to imagine now each of these characters, L, the open parenthesis, and the letter A as characters. Okay? Play the role of those characters. One of you, maybe, can I ask a male participant to imagine yourself as the letter L? Do we have some male participants? Okay. If you have identified yourself as the letter L, let's have another participant. Siguro para gender sensitive naman. Let's have a female naman. I don't want all male or all female. So you have a male and a female participant there playing the role of L and A. Of course, there's a character in between L and A, and that's an open parenthesis. Panindigan natin. That also has to be, that role of an open parenthesis also has to be played by one of you. Okay? What do you notice about L and A? Can I have one participant sharing an idea about L and A with that parenthesis between the two of them? Visually, look at the open parenthesis. It seems to be facing letter A. It's back turned against letter L, right? Can you imagine what I'm saying? So, what is happening between L and A, and what is the role of that parenthesis? Anyone from the audience? Can they unmute so that they can participate? Madam Host.
According to Mr. Elmer Brabante, he said
Okay.
that it's a mediator.
A mediator. If it's a mediator, why is the back turned against L and it's facing A? Do I have any answer in the chat room? I'm trying to look at the chat room now.
Ma'am, according to Mr. Rogelio, it separates L and A.
It separates the two. In other words, by separating them, there is no way that L and A can come together or become very close to each other, right? They cannot really connect with each other because the open parenthesis blocks L from coming any near A.
Ma'am, again, according to Miss Carla, the open parenthesis shows a separation or a pause between L and A.
Yes, I agree with you completely. And not just a pause, it really is a separation. The parenthesis separates, physically separates L from A. And so L and A cannot come together. So what happens to L and A? Let's see what happens in the succeeding lines. Just look at the poem on the right side. You have it there. Let's see what happens to L and A. Two point one. It becomes LE this time. You seem to have encountered that letter L earlier, right? L was also in the first line of the first stanza. But what happened to A? Why did it turn into an E this time? This seems to be a different character. Okay? So another character has to play the role of E. L, retain your position. You're still the original L in line 1. Carried over now to stanza 2. You get it? Do you follow? So L now is in the company of E. Did this relationship between L and E work? Take note, this time there is no separation. There is no barrier anymore. L and E are together. Are they going to be together happily ever after? Do you think they're going to be together for a long, long time?
Ma'am, according to Miss Lorna, A has a boundary between herself and L. And according to Miss Elena, it can be a story of a forbidden love.
Ayan na, your imagination is working. Thank you. I love that. How do you find that? Now you have your own story, no? Actually, you can even say that that open parenthesis may be very unfriendly to L. And it is protecting A from L, such that the two cannot come together. Diba? So physically, that's what you see, no? Something went wrong with my screen. I lost my... Okay, let me just go back to that. Okay. So with L and E, do you think this is going to be a happily ever after story? How do you prove? What can justify your answer? With L and A, you know that there was a barrier. They're separated by the parentheses, so they were not able to get together at all. How about L and E? Instanza 2. Okay, I will ask you now to look at the succeeding lines of the poem. Do you still find together these two letters L and E at any other point, at any other time, in any other location in the poem? Are they still together? L, E. You can see the poem. No, ma'am, not anymore. Okay. In other words, they were together only for that one brief moment. Okay. Because the next line, 2.2, does not contain L and E, and you don't find them anymore in any other line of the poem. So they parted ways. AF is the next line. You've met A before in the first line, 1.1. But now, what happened to A? What happened to our A? This time.
According to Mr. Rogelio, it is with F.
Correct. A now finds good company in F. So they're together now. And do you think this worked? Did they enjoy each other's company much? I can see you nodding your head. May, no? Yes. What makes you think so?
Because I see them again, A and F, I see them again in 2.3 line.
Correct. You can see them together again in 2.3. But take note, they change positions. AF became FA. In other words, what makes a relationship work?
Mutual relationship.
Mutual relationship. They accommodated each other.
It's a
Never mind if one plays the primary role in a relationship, the dominant role, or the subordinate role. Okay lang. It doesn't matter. A was playing dominant role in 2.2. In 2.3, A was playing the subordinate role. It's okay. And so the relationship between A and F works. Okay? Now, yes, it's a give and take relationship. Thank you for that comment, Emmy. So give and take lang, AF, FA, and they will be happy together and they will live happily ever after. Okay, let's go to the next line. (3.1). Aha, you see L again. But what do you notice about L this time? L seems to have found good company. Yes, it is with another L. It found good company with one of its own kind. Exactly the same, no? Maybe gender-wise, all other qualities, all other circumstances, they're together. They're practically identical with each other. But do you think that kind of relationship will work? After all, they're the same practically. As I said, they're identical. Did it last long? Try to find L in the company of another L elsewhere in the poem. Are they still together after this line? You're reading very fast. You're already in 4.3. I'm only in 3.1. Yes, some of our learners are actually very eager. Eh? They move on all the way down to the other lines. That's okay. That's okay. Anticipatory moves, no? I love that. Okay, let's see what happens. Next line, it's not about L, but this time you see an S and a parenthesis. S is the one now being blocked by a parenthesis. It cannot go out, it cannot leave its position there because the close parenthesis seems to be blocking its way, no? But let's see what happens to that S. 4.2, O-N-E. Yes, we encountered the character E earlier. E was in the company of L earlier. And we encountered two new characters, O and N, and they come together. Do you think they're happy together, O and E? What do you think will happen to them? Is there potential for their being happy together as O and E? Now this time, you can read that line. Surprise, surprise, this is one line in the poem that you can actually read as a word. One. This is a very good insight in the chat box. It says, like in a relationship, three is a crowd. That's one perspective, one way of looking at it. On the other hand, you can also say they are three, but they are one. Despite there being three different individuals, they feel as one. Yes, Philip says they're as one. So parang 3-in-1, parang instant coffee, 3-in-1. They blend together and you are able to enjoy your coffee 3-in-1. It's not like coffee, cream, and sugar will be taken separately. Taken as one, it's delicious, diba? When they're 3-in-1, because there is unity and they blend well together. Okay, I see all the comments there in the chat box. Thank you very much for your participation. 4.3, what happened? What do we have here? There is that one character we have been observing all along. that one character we met in 1.1, 2.1, 3.1, and now 4.3, L is alone. Thank you very much, Rysel. L is alone. It's okay if, yes, Elmer says, L decides to be alone. Okay lang if you decide to be alone. The problem is if it is against your will that you become alone, that everybody leaves you. So you're now left alone, not in the company of anybody anymore. Okay. L cannot be with anyone else. And that's what Eloisa is saying. Okay. Let's move on to the next stanza. Last line and last stanza. If we read that, I-ness, it's part of a word, but on its own, you can read it as an I-ness. You know, when you talk about your being an I, and you want to make that a noun, di ba in English, you have the rule that if you add N-E-S-S to a word, an adjective, it becomes a noun. Lovely, loveliness. Here you have an I-ness. Yes, being alone, being all alone by the self, maybe because you're left all alone, just you, yourself alone. Thank you, Rysel, for that contribution. Is it possible that L has been left all alone because all this time L only focuses on that I-ness, not caring about the other, but only focusing on the I, that I-ness. Okay, now let's look at our poem again. If we are going to do an analysis of this now, imagine what happened. Try to recall what happened during the role play. L, parenthesis A, and then L tried to join E, A decided to go with F, and then they're still together, FA in 2.3. L tries to find one of its own kind, but still the relationship did not work. Next line, you find an S. Do you think that S is happy? Take note, that's only, it seems to be the only line other than L where you find only one letter of the alphabet, S. The only other line is 4.3, and that's L. But there is a big difference between 4.1 and 4.3. Take note that S stands alone, all by itself. I will explain that later. Okay? In contrast to 4.3, practically the same, only one letter in those lines, but there is a big difference, which I am going to explain a little later. Okay, now, because my responsibility is to discuss language and literature, I have to keep my promise. I will explain to you the linguistic features in this poem. Okay, are you ready to discuss language and literature now? How does language and literature work in this particular text? What do you see on screen? A.
A.
Just that letter A. And you find that in line 1.1 with L parenthesis A. So I isolated letter A in that line. Is there a meaning to A in English? We're now analyzing the text in its use of language. What does A in English mean?
It's an article.
Correct. It's an article. So in English, a is an article that we use before a singular noun, not for plural nouns. You're limited to singular noun. Okay? Now, I want to call your attention to L, A, 1.1, no? L, A. There was a parenthesis. I removed the parenthesis. So you're left with L, A, la. Does la mean anything?
Yeah.
Is there anyone in the room now who is familiar with other languages?
It's Spanish for the article the.
Correct. And what is its characteristic as an article in Spanish?
Well, the is, when you use the article the, it refers to a specific object.
Correct. Correct. It's a
Object.
definite article. We
Yeah.
call that a definite article, di ba?
Yes.
And la exists in both Spanish and
Spanish.
French. And in both languages, la is an article that is used before a singular noun. Okay? So, there is that emphasis on the singular noun. How about le? You recall the poem in 2.1? L-E. Le. Okay, those of you who are familiar with French, in French, le is also an article used before a singular noun. They seem to share a common feature, no? They're all articles used to refer to singular nouns. Now, something more exciting coming up. O-N-E. You found that in one of the lines, right? O-N-E. Reading as one. We seem to be emphasizing singularity. One, being alone. Add to that, L. You know the good old-fashioned typewriters? Do you still have an Underwood typewriter in your house? Don't sell that, huh? That's going to be a museum piece. my children cannot imagine me using the good old-fashioned typewriter. Mama, may computer naman. Hindi, I have to type something in a form. So I'm using the typewriter. When your typewriter does not have the number 1 in the keyboard, what do you use to substitute for the number 1?
The L, the key L.
Of course. You can actually use the small letter L, lowercase l, and it looks like a number 1. It does. And you can see it on screen. You're not even sure if that's a letter L or a number 1. I actually typed a lowercase l. It looks like a number 1. Iconically, it looks like a number 1. So that's the visual graphic representation of the number 1. Take note, there are contrasts in the poem. If only to emphasize the message. 3.1 has 2 L's, a double L, double lowercase l, as against 4.3. You only have 1 L. It emphasizes all the more that feeling of being alone. From 3.1, the double L, to 4.3, the single L. Some of you actually noticed that earlier in the chat box when I said you're already anticipating what's going to happen next. And you immediately noticed it because it calls attention to itself. All the other lines have 2 letters. They come in pairs, and then you have a single L. Now, you might be wondering, ma'am, meron naman letter S. S is also alone. Okay, I agree. But take note, how many of you are familiar with linguistics? Do I have anybody here who is a linguistics major or took some courses in Introduction to Linguistics? Are you familiar with the term morpheme? The morpheme is the smallest unit that has meaning.
So
Do you know that S, all by its pretty self, already has meaning? Think about it. Does S have meaning? What is implied by S? What is the meaning of an S in an utterance? You see the letter S. What does it connote? Anyone? Naku, puno na yata yung chat box. Ayan, ang dami ng answer agad. Nalingat lang ako. Ang dami na. Thank you, thank you. Plurality. Okay? It denotes plurality. It makes a noun plural. Correct. You're all absolutely right. You add S to a noun, the noun pluralizes. If you add S to a verb, the verb becomes singular. In other words, S, all by its pretty self, has meaning. So does it need to attach itself to any other letter? Ay naku, okay lang. S, I can stand alone. I already have meaning all by myself. I am fulfilled. I am happy with my own existence because I mean. I have meaning. Okay? I want to call your attention to that set of words, a leaf falls. Take note, this entire utterance is separated from the rest of the poem through the parentheses, the open parentheses and the closed parentheses. In between the open parentheses and the closed parentheses, you actually find a complete sentence. It has a subject, it has a verb, a subject, a predicate, complete sentence yan, a leaf falls. And what do you find outside the parentheses?
loneliness. Loneliness.
Loneliness. And how does loneliness appear physically, visually in the poem? This is what you see. L separated from the rest of the word loneliness. Hence, initially, what you have is L and oneliness. Again, think about it. Your dictionary might not contain the word oneliness, but you know the meaning of oneliness. Being one, no? It's oneliness. It can contain some meaning there. You can give an interpretation to it. So the words inside the parentheses, no, separate the word loneliness to become one, the number one, and oneliness. If only to emphasize being alone, being solitary, that moment of solitariness, no? Being all alone, all by oneself, may be resulting in loneliness. So what is loneliness? A leaf falls. It probably evokes that feeling of loneliness. Now, in terms of structure, what do you notice in this poem in terms of its structure? Let's look at the structure. Madam Host, do I still have time?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, what do you notice about the structure? This is the poem again. Let's go back to the original poem. That's how it appears. Let's discuss now the structure of the poem. For what is poetry anyway? Poetry is different from other forms of discourse. It relies much on its structure, division into lines and stanzas, unlike other forms of discourse, diba? You have paragraphs. This time you have lines and stanzas. This is how it looks like in the original. And what does it resemble? How does it appear physically? Can anybody describe the physical appearance? Yes, thank you very much. This is very unconventional. Okay, doesn't conform to literary conventions. I agree with you 100%. But how does it look like physically? If you are going to move away from your screen, how would you describe the shape? Does it look like a poem?
No.
No.
Just
So what are we talking about? It doesn't look like a poem.
because,
Ayan,
because it is an images poem by
correct.
A. Cummings.
Oo.
So the shape, the
Oo.
arrangement, the way how the letters are arranged,
Oo.
looks like an L.
Correct. Okay, if you go to the chat box, I have several answers here. They're all wonderful answers. Naku, I wish you were all my students in my classroom. Ang ganda ng answers nyo. It looks like the number 1. It looks like a letter L. Correct. That's what it's all about. It is in a vertical arrangement. In other words, the lines have been arranged in such a way that it resembles a letter L. The longest line being the last line. That's your I-ness line at the bottom. And that looks like the bottom part of the letter L. So it is actually a letter L, or maybe a number 1. It also looks like a number 1. Did you notice the arrangement? My students would say, Ma'am, ano ba ito? It's not, what are you're asking us to analyze this? There's nothing to analyze here, ma'am. They're all broken up. They're letters scattered all over the page, ma'am. O sige, they're letters, pero what does your brain tell you to do? Automatically, mechanically, the brain has a way of putting order into something chaotic. There is order in disorder. And how does the brain work? How do we read? We read from left to right. We read from top to bottom. And if you look at the poem and you read from left to right, top to bottom, you try to connect the letters to form logical linguistic forms. And what are these linguistic forms? Beginning with the word. We try to form words out of a seemingly jumbled up arrangement of letters. And so, hindi ba yung teacher, if you want your students to connect words, di ba, cannot, they spell that as 2 separate words. So what does the teacher do? Put this mark, yung ganon, or this one above, join, meaning join. So you try to join L and E, and this is how it's going to go. L going to E, E going to A. Take note, you have to go down because the letter A is down below. A again connects to F, and then go down again. This is how it goes for the entire poem. You understand my point? Are you still with me? So, as we connect the letters to form logical words in the English language, we are actually tracing the movement of the leaf as it falls. The downward swaying movement of the leaf as it falls to the ground. swaying from L to E, it sways, it glides all the way down to A, it sways again to F, and you have a repetition of that kind of movement. So who says that this text is nothing but jumbled up letters? It is not, because the structure also tells you the meaning of the text. If you look at the arrangement of the stanzas, first stanza, 1 line, second stanza, 3, third stanza, 1 line, fourth stanza, 3, last stanza, 1 line, 1, 3, 1, 3, 1. You can imagine that this is the movement of the leaf. Can you see my hand on screen? 1, 3, and it goes all the way down. 1 again, 3 all the way down, and 1. There are short, abrupt movements of the leaf and long gliding movements downwards. In imitation of the movement of the leaf, that motion, the downward motion, you have the 1, 3, 1, 3, 1 arrangement of the lines into stanzas. Okay, so this is one form that was introduced, no? This kind of poetry became very popular, especially with poets like E. E. Cummings. What is concrete poetry? Some might call it visual poetry. Not all concrete poetry is visual. Some of them are audio.
Yeah.
Poetry, in other words, concrete poetry as opposed to abstract. No? The word concrete as opposed to abstract. Concrete means something you can perceive, something you can experience with your senses. You have to use your senses in order to experience the text in front of you. Concrete poetry allows you to see. Concrete poetry allows you to hear the sounds of the letters, the words. And in this case, you have your sense of sight activated, completely activated, to arrive at the complete meaning of the text that I have given you for analysis. Thank you very much for your participation, and thank you very much for your attention.
Let's call on Ma'am May.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Laurel, for that very clear and interesting dissection of language and literature and igniting our imagination and creativity by showing how these two fields come together, enabling us how to teach the literary discourse in a language classroom. So we now come to the open forum so as to engage our audience. There are 50 plus participants in the Zoom. So yeah, we can have them engage in this conversation. So please be reminded to maybe you can just open your microphone and then ask your question, or you can write your question in the comments section. Anyone?
I see very familiar names in the chat box. It's good to be in the company of old friends. Some of them I've seen the last time I saw them was probably 20 years ago, way before the pandemic. Thank you very much. It's good to see your names even on screen.
Yeah, Abby Biliesa is here.
Yes.
He's my co-teacher in Aquinas University decades ago.
Talaga.
Yes,
And I see Ma'am Cyril.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Okay, so ma'am, there is a question here. Would you agree that language and literature are twin disciplines?
Okay, I actually was going to talk about that at the beginning of my lecture. I wanted the audience to come up with that question, and you did. Thank you. Yes, I have an answer to that. You know, as I mentioned the name of my mentor in UP, Professor Nieves Epistola was such a great teacher. She was my teacher in the course called Language and Literature. And this was how she explained the relationship. They're not just twins, sabi niya. When you talk about language and literature, you talk about those two as one and inseparable. In other words, it's like a relationship between a Mr. and Miss. Dati Mr. and Mrs. yan, no? So to be more gender sensitive, masyadong sexist, the women wouldn't like the term Mrs. So Mr. and Miss. That's the kind of relationship, sabi niya. You cannot separate them. They're married. It's like you have a relationship between a husband and wife. And it's also, my addition to that explanation also is, it's also like the relationship between bread and butter. When you talk about having breakfast of bread and butter, it's not like you're going to eat the bread first and butter next. Ugh, yuck. Have you ever tried that? When you say bread and butter, talagang bread and butter yan, you eat them together. You don't really take them apart, no? They have to be together. So yun, that's a kind of relationship. It's a union between language and literature so that it will bear fruit. Okay. There is a specific area, a specific discipline in linguistics that marries of language and literature. Are you familiar with the field called stylistics?
Yes.
Stylistics is the application of linguistic devices to literary studies.
Yes.
So you look at literature as language. What is literature anyway? My teacher would say, what is literature anyway but words? And what do the words do? Words have meaning. Words can result in thinking. Your experience this afternoon made you imagine, no, a different world. You're not looking at the text on print, in print and on the page anymore. You're looking at the text and it generates a lot of imagination. It helps you to think about meanings and delve deep, no, into these meanings produced, no, by the words. So that is language and literature.
Yes, ma'am. We agree with you on that. Actually, there is this premise that when you are asked what is literature, you may answer literature is language because well, language is the medium of literature. How else will a poet or a writer express or articulate what he or she wants to say, but through words or through language?
Right, right. Okay.
Yes. So
Yes,
yes.
Lorna is raising her hand. Go ahead, Lorna. I can hear you.
Lorna, you may now ask your question.
Please unmute.
Yeah, please unmute. Perhaps we could ask Elmer. Elmer, do you have any question? Mr. Elmer Brabante.
You can tell us your encounters with literature.
Yes.
You might want to share your experiences with language and literature in your own classroom.
Yes.
Do your students encounter difficulties with the language of literature? You know, when I teach the course on language and literature, I tell my students, this is my cocktail hour. I just enjoy, every class meeting. I encourage them to bring their coffee to class. When we were having the face-to-face meetings, I would even call in the pizza delivery to bring us pizza in the classroom. And we enjoy our discussion of literature with pizza and coffee and whatever in the classroom.
Miss Evangelina Serial says that literature is the best means to learn a language.
Oh yes, I can agree with you on that. How? Okay. How can you learn language through literature? Again, I don't have facilities of a face-to-face with you now. This was done in one of our classes, in one of our training programs. No, just put the word mother at the center. No, just write the word mother. Draw a circle around it, and then you can ask your students what words go together with mother. Put the words around the circle. And they are very, very creative about it. No? They have the words in their bodega. I call that the bodega of words. Yung stock room nila, warehouse of words. So they dig into that warehouse. Mother, caring, mother, devoted, mother, cooking, ayan na, mother, taking care of me. They have all of these words around the circle. And you can actually ask them later, organize the thoughts there. Put together similar ideas. O ayan, you're teaching them outlining na. Putting together similar ideas. And then later on, ask them to write a whole composition about it. It's very good material actually for teaching language. Yeah. Lorna, are you
Hello.
ready?
Yes, ma'am. I was muted a while ago. I was one of your students, ma'am. Many, many years ago. I don't know if you still remember me.
Oh, wow.
It was, yes, it was a fun class, ma'am. And we had fun activities. And, I've used some of your activities in my literature classes. Yeah, because I still remember the fun activities that we had, the role playing. And then, of course, not to mention the snacks that we had during our class. So it was fun to do your class. Yeah. My question, ma'am, is
yes, sure.
thank you for that very insightful interpretation of E. Cummings' poems. I wonder if all our students will be able to, I don't know if they would be able to analyze it the way we did now, but with a little, push, prompting, and creativity, I believe it's possible. My question is, I believe that not all poems are linguistically structured, the way that E. Cummings' poem is structured. So in our analysis, sometimes we have to force it because some poems are very conventional, not structured the way E. Cummings' poem structured or is structured rather. So should we force it, or should we allow our creativity to rule our analysis? And should we analyze it the way we did it now, or just considering that most poems are conventionally structured? So I wish all poems were structured this way so that we could glean as many possible insights as possible. But no, not all poems are like that. Not all poems are as interesting as the poem that you used. So thank you, ma'am.
Well, actually, how I wish I had the whole semester with you. No? I moved from the very, very classical forms like the sonnet, the sonnet A, B, C, D, E, F, G, G for the English sonnet. I teach that to my students. And I also use a lot of creativity in helping them understand even the conventional poems. It all depends on your approach. How are you going to, in a way, interpret lines? Si Browning, My Last Duchess. What can be more conventional than that, ano? And you know what? My students enjoyed reading that poem, and you know what happened at the end of our discussion? They said, wow, bagay na bagay ito gawa ng movie, ma'am. Pinatay niya lahat yung mga former niya siguro, wives and his lovers, no? And all that. Ma'am, parang siya, serial killer and all that. You know, it triggered a lot of discussion in class. And it was only one text that we were handling. And I said, okay, there are limits also to your wild imagination. And the limit is the text. The boundaries are the text. Justify your answer using the text. For as long as you can stand by your answer is acceptable. I cannot say your answer is wrong. Kanina, ang dami yung answer sa chat box. I'm not about to say wrong ka, mali yung sinabi mo. No, lahat tama. Because you had your way of looking at the text, and I know you can justify your answer. That is what literature is all about anyway. And yes, do not stay away from the conventional poems. Maybe we'll need another session for this. Teaching conventional poetry naman, even the rhythm, yung mga estudyante ko, we do a lot of role play. O sige, can you demonstrate to me, for example, the ayam? What is an ayam? Unstressed followed by a stressed. So how does it go? So they beat on their desks yung computer table nila. I can hear them beating. Kaya lang ang disadvantage because of internet. Minsan mas mabagal yung internet ng iba, hindi magsabay-sabay. Sabi ko, hindi tayo pwede maging orchestra. Iba-ibang timing natin. But anyway, just to give you an idea, ayam.
Yes.
O sige, ganon. Habang nagbibit sila, shall I compare thee to a summer's day? Thou art more lovely and more temperate.
Wow, that's sonnet 18.
Of course. Very, very conventional, the iambic. Sabi ko, yung baliktad niyan, tunta, tunta, tunta. Ganun naman. So how does it go? And they go, tunta, tunta, yung stressed followed by the unstressed. And so we go, double, double, toil and trouble, fire burn and cauldron bubble. O diba? Fair is foul and foul is fair. Hover through the fog and filthy air. And all body language. Take note. There's a theory behind this. It is actually Howard Gardner's multiple intelligences that I was using. Without mentioning the term or the theory that goes with it, no? Kasi intimidating yan eh. You're teaching two theories, no? On the one hand, you're teaching maybe the formalist approach. On the other hand, you're teaching multiple intelligences. You just assume that the students in the classroom they're made up of different intelligences. Some of them are not linguistically intelligent, not as intelligent as the others in terms of language. But you ask them to use their body, kinesthetic intelligence, ask them to dance, interpret the leaf that is falling. Oh my goodness, I had one student dancing in the classroom just to interpret that leaf that falls, and another student watching with loneliness. Ang ganda. So kinesthetic intelligence. Yeah. And then spatial intelligence, yung artistic talent. I ask my students, sige, hindi mo ma-express, sige nga, punta ka na lang sa board. You draw what you can imagine. Drinawin niya yung leaf that's falling. At tapos sabi ko, ba't ang daming leaves na naiwan sa tree? Kaya nga ma'am, yun ang loneliness. Because that leaf was falling and all its siblings were left on the tree. Bakit siya ang nalaglag? Bakit siya lang? That really brings about loneliness, sabi niya. O di ba? You tap on the students' creativity, no? Just motivate them. That's the key to make them appreciate literary texts, not by forcing anything on them. Hanapin niyo yung potential. Identify your students' intelligences. That's why you have to know your students. The students are not just student numbers. Don't treat them as student numbers. They are human beings. They are individuals. No? And you have to understand each one of them. What is their strength? Build up on those strengths. So, yun.
Yeah, we couldn't agree more, ma'am. Now, there is another question. In teaching literature, should we begin with tackling the literary theories to arm the students with the lenses by which to approach the piece? This is by Elmer Brabante.
Okay. If you begin with theory, sometimes the theories are intimidating. I remember I listened to one speaker in a conference, and the speaker started talking about the post-colonial discourse and went on to discuss sino yung umpisa niya. The constructivist approach and blah, blah, blah. I wanted to walk out of the room. I did not recognize any of the terms. Of course, I have heard about those terms, but the way the speaker introduced the theories, it was really way, way out, no? And it was beyond me. Not that I have not read anything about it, but the way the speaker put together all the intimidating, elements of the theory, talagang I wanted to step out of the room, or I wanted to just sleep. Hindi ko maintindihan. I would prefer, no, that the students learn inductively, give them samples, and then maybe eventually. Ngayon, I was not even talking about Howard Gardner. I was not even talking about multiple intelligences. I just happened to, very casually, I bring you to this theory of multiple intelligences because you can actually use that in the literature classroom. And I demonstrated it using the text without saying, ito kinesthetic intelligence, o ito spatial intelligence. No need for that. The students will appreciate, will learn to grasp, grapple with meanings, even without the technical terms to go with them. So that's how it works. So just begin with something that the student is familiar with. So you pick them up where they are. Kaya nga may diagnostic essay tayo at the beginning of the semester. Do you still do that? You ask them for a diagnostic writing, whatever. And sa akin, basta tell me what you are, tell me where you are, tell me what you want to tell me at the beginning of the semester. Anything goes. Ganun lang. And I find out a lot about my students, Yun nga lang, dinadagdagan ko yung trabaho ko. Pero I enjoy it naman I get to understand each member of the class.
Yeah. Now, before I call on Francis, there is just one question from Ava Belleza. Unpacking meaning in poetry is a daunting task. Would you suggest a strategy to ease the feeling of unease that many students feel in a literature classroom?
Itutuloy ko yung especially teaching poetry really. They're turned off. Ay, poetry, mahirap yan. And then I begin, introduction to poetry. I begin with the ayam. Oh, you've heard of the iambic? Ma'am, ang hirap-hirap nga yan. O sige, tap your desk. Tan, ganyan lang. Sabay-sabay sila. Maingay yung classroom namin kasi sabay-sabay nagbibit. Sabi ko, just imagine we are a music class. And you're playing the drums, tat, tan, and then I recite the poem, and then go the reverse, tum, ta, and then I go, fair is foul, and foul is fair. So, we go, umiisip sila ng mga poems na familiar sa kanila. So, iambic, tatum, 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 tatum. Whose woods these are? I think I know. Ganon. Tapos, more interesting, pagkatapos namin ng iambic, trochaic, no, punta kami sa anapest. So, how does the anapest go? Tatatum, tatatum, tatatum. 2 unaccented followed by 1 accented. So, how does it go? Can you try it now?
That's
Among you now.
I think the poem Anna Believe by Edgar Allan Poe is a good example for anapesting.
Anapest,
there was many a year ago.
it was many and many a year ago in this kingdom by the sea. It's a combination of iambic and anapest. But I think it will be, hindi ko pa natatry, baka predominantly iambic. May ano lang, konting anapest. So anyway, the interesting part about anapest, no, do it now. Tingnan nyo kung ano madidiscover nyo. Let's see what you will discover out of that. Tap your desk. Tat-tat-tum. 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 Okay? Tat-tat-tum. Are you doing it now? Are you tapping your desks? If you can unmute and you tap your desk para marinig ko.
Okay, let's unmute.
Ma'am, wag na po. Chaotic po yan. Hindi po tayo synchronize lahat.
Okay, I will do it for you. Tingnan nyo kung ano mangyayari, no? Tat-tat-tan. Tan-tan-tan. 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 Can you hear me? Tat-tat-tum. 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 You know what happened in my class when I was doing that? And they were doing it on their desks. You can try it out with your students with the smaller number. So you have tat-tat-tum. Can you hear it? Can you hear?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. As I was doing that, guess what? One student, no, started singing.
Yes, ma'am. Queen.
Singing. Go!
We will rock you.
Dun, 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 dun. We will rock you. You know, before the end of the class, everybody was singing in the classroom. Tumakbo yung kabilang kwarto. Ano bang ingay-ingay nyo? Anyway, the point is, problema mo yan kung maingay kami at naiingayan ka. Kami, enjoy kami. So,
all right, so let's call on Francis.
Yes, ma'am. I don't know if it's a question or it's more of a comment kasi you've mentioned yung multiple intelligence. A participant also mentioned the total response approach. Now, di po ba nagkakaroon tayo ng para ba disconnect or medyo issue yung pag-transfer natin from face-to-face to online? How do you manage that, ma'am? Tapos, yun pa, may mga students tayo na nasanay na ng pure online. Pagbalik naman natin, paano na naman yun para sa kanila? Yun lang po, ma'am.
I might need another lecture, full lecture on that. Parang hindi ko kayang explain in 3 sentences. But anyway, my classes now, no, I thought it was going to be talagang disaster for me at the beginning of the pandemic. I am such a dinosaur when it comes to technology. Talagang hindi ako marunong mag-share screen. You know, the first month of classes, I was actually deleting myself always. Maling-mali yung mga buttons na naklik-klik ko. My students would say, "Ma'am, where are you? Where are you?" It was really funny, no? So, nawala din yung stress ko kasi we just laughed it off. Sabi ko, I'm still here, but you know, I disappeared from screen. I don't know what happened. But anyway, I got used to holding classes online. And right now, I think I will find it even more difficult to go back to face-to-face. I'm enjoying my classes online kasi a lot of time savings for me. I don't get caught in traffic. My
Yes.
students come on time. It has never happened before in my life. Perfect attendance all time, my gosh. Eh dati ang daming dahilan eh. Ma'am, wala kasing ikot. Ma'am, kasi umulan, walang dumadaan na sasakyan, walang ikot, hindi kami makasakay. They come to class 30 minutes late. Patapos na, magdi-dismiss na ako. But now, everybody comes to class on time. Look at it positively. Don't look at the downside eh. Of course, you cannot ignore the problems, the challenges. Okay lang yan. Pero silent ka na lang. Sige, try to solve whatever you can. Cope with all those challenges. Pero in class, kailangan cheerful ka eh, no? Kailangan masaya yung klase, no? Wag mo simulan na ang hirap-hirap naman ito. Talaga magiging mahirap yan. And you know what happened? Kasi in the classroom, I was buying pizza for them occasionally. Pagka hindi pa araw ng sweldo, Marie Biscuits na lang. Alam niyo yung Marie Biscuits? yung mura lang na biskwit. O sige, ayan. O kaya crackers, skyflakes, whatever. O sige, kain muna kayo. And then while eating, discussion goes on. No? Parang I create that atmosphere of coffee and conversation. Literature is not something you should agonize about. Do not agonize over a literary piece. Whatever it is that is given to you, you can understand it. You have to make the students feel relaxed, that they know what they're going to talk about. They can understand the piece. Never intimidating. So, kumakain sila, may pizza, and then somebody starts the conversation, somebody picks up. To tell you the truth, last semester, when was it? No, 2 semesters ago in UP, my literature class, my class was supposed to be from 2:30 to 4. And guess what? 2:30 to 4 every Tuesday and Thursday. My students would stay online until 5:30. Nagiging 3-hour class kami, 2:30 to 5:30. Ma'am, wag muna kayong aalis sa room. Hello, 2:30 to 4 lang tayo. But they want more discussion. Humihingi pa sila ng more text to analyze. Pinabasa ko ng isang nobela. Hiningi pa yung sequel ng nobela. Sabi ko, isa lang naman ang required. Eh ma'am, bitin eh. Gusto namin yung sequel. And they continue to keep in touch with me. Some of them are already in law school. They're still in touch with me, discussing literature. Ganon. Ganon ang mangyayari sa classroom. And it is so, for me, it is so uplifting.
Yes. That is why, ma'am, you are so loved in DECL. We know that.
Thank you.
Now,
I didn't know that.
well, I'm telling you now from what I've heard from my, those students. Anyway, perhaps this is now the last question. On the other hand, how can literature help students understand the workings of language?
How can you make the student understand the workings of language? I started by introducing language as a system. It has sounds. Kaya, yun na nga, sometimes nagtatawanan lang kami. We play in church. Actual example yun sa classroom. It happened inside the classroom. There were foreign students eh. Sabi ng isa, we play in church. Sabi ko, what do you do in church? We play. Really? You play in church? Yung pala we pray nga, no? So, the classmates were actually giggling. He did not understand why his classmates were giggling. So, that was an occasion for me to discuss sounds and meanings. So, pronouncing the words, yung fried lice nila. Are you sure you want to eat fried lice? Anyway, so beginning with sounds and then words. How are words formed? Ayan na nga, yung mga morpheme, yung S. Ma'am, paano magkaka-meaning? Sige nga, tingnan ko, yung S na yan, may meaning yan. Oh. Teacher, dinagdagan ko ng S. Nagbago ba meaning? Ay, oo nga ma'am, dumami sila. Oh, okay. So you agree with me, may meaning siya. You have to explain. Take the pains really of explaining language as a system and they will enjoy it. Akala nung iba boring ang study of language. It's exciting, no? So yung yung humor ng Pilipino, yung mga jokes natin galing yan sa mga puns natin eh. Tingnan niyo yung mga lumalabas sa sa mga cellphone niyo, text messages niyo. By the way, kami nung isang colleague ko in the department, also well loved by her students. She's with the language committee of the department. Ang ginawa namin during the pandemic, lahat ng jokes namin, klina-classify namin according to the language system. Yung sentences, yung ganun, words, no, morphemes. So mayroon na kaming lesson plan based on the text messages circulated during the pandemic. Ganun lang. Pinaglilibangan lang namin.
Yeah.
Masaya.
Ma'am, may isa pa pong pahabol na question, no, from Elmer Brabante. So, can we use literary poetic text to teach grammar?
Yes, of course. Of course. You know what? Ang isang pinakamagandang text namin diyan. Are you familiar with Lewis Carroll, yung kanyang Jabberwocky?
Yes, ma'am.
It was brillig. Pinapapalitan namin sa mga estudyante. Okay, make it more sensical. You think that's nonsensical? O sige, try your hand at poetry. Change the words, make it more sensical. They create their own new poetry out of it. Ang ganda. It's a very good example. Even a simple row, row, row your boat gently down the stream. O sige, gumawa kayo ng sarili nyo. I begin with, sige, ang verb natin is not row. Change it to drive. So ano mangyayari? Drive, drive, drive your boat? Hindi pwede. Ano mangyayari? Drive, drive, drive your car. Gently down the stream? Hindi pwede. Gently down the road or gently down the street. Merrily, 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 merrily. Okay. Life is but a dream. Hindi pwede. Hindi magra-rhyme sa street. Life is but a treat. O, di ba? May original na sila. So, make them play with language. Discover the potentials of language. And before you know it, they're writing their own poetry na. Serious poetry. Ganun lang yun. You just have to build up their confidence. No? Language is not intimidating. Literature is not intimidating at all. It is fun. Sabi ko nga, it's my cocktail hour eh. Oh, sige. Any other questions?
I guess we end here, ma'am. Once again, thank you very much, Professor Laurel, for your very informative, engaging, and heartwarming lecture. It is indeed an honor to have you with us today. Surely,
my pleasure.
Yes. So surely our teachers in the literature field, as well as in the language field, have learned and have been equipped with insight, strategies that can enhance their pedagogy as well as our students' classroom experience. So the class and UNIT's team would like to present you the certificate appreciation, which reads, this certificate appreciation is given to Maria Milagros, Laurel, PhD, for sharing her knowledge and expertise as a speaker of class lecture series titled Teaching Literature in a Language Classroom, conducted online on July 15, 2022. Signed, Professor Maria Luisa T. Reyes, PhD, Editor-in-Chief of UNITAS and President of Class Cultural Literary Art Studies Society Incorporated. So, class would like to thank the thousands of viewers, especially to those who are here with us in Zoom today, who have been asking questions, contributing to the discussions with the remarks, or even for just having been there, quietly listening, watching, and taking down notes about the lectures. So, also, please follow the official Facebook pages of class and Unitas for more updates. By the way, you can attend the next installment that will be delivered by our very own Professor Cristina Pantoja Hidalgo next Friday on July 22. So again, this is May Sevilla Perez. Thank you and good afternoon.